Today we will have four speakers. One is doing the presentation online, and we will start with the first presentation of Ms. Silva Heinonen. Sorry, she's a PhD researcher at KU Leuven for the DEMIN project, which deals with conflicts related to migration and negotiating a social cohesion through communication. Her presentation will deal with social media threat framing of immigration. You will have the floor.
The opportunity to take part in this discussion. As said, I'm Silva Heinonen, and in my work I look into the effects of harmful online discourse, especially around migration, and I look into and try to identify potential individual differences that might increase susceptibility to these effects. And today I'm presenting some of my first work of my PhD in collaboration with my supervisor, Ibrahim Zaroyali, with the title, The More Sensitive, the More Susceptible, Threat Sensitivity, Emotions and Attitudes in Response to Social Media Threat Framing of Immigration. So to start with some background, as we know, immigration is one of the most divisive political issues at the Western democracies. And the public debate around immigration is characterized by morality and emotions, where for some it's a question of human rights, and for others they perceive it as a threat to the nation and their cultural values. And these emotions are amplified in the social media platforms with the algorithms, but also based on anonymity or just people having less filter. And right-wing political actors have leveraged this type of threat and fear to further their political agenda. So, but where do these perceptions come from? So here are some recent samples from the Belgian news media VRT and Het Laatste Nieuws and others, and I will read out some of them. So up to 50,000 new asylum applications, unsustainable, a tsunami that our society cannot handle, a risk from migration pressure, and we need to combat illegal migration, and so on and so on. And today I'm not talking about how this is prevalent in the news media, because we already know that, and we already know that this has a harmful effect on public perception and increasing harsher policy preferences and negative attitudes towards migration. But I'm showing this to show how they echo the narratives of the populist actors by using dehumanizing language, such as natural disasters like calling migration as a tsunami, or using war language like combating illegal migration. And these are also headlines that we might encounter in social media in our everyday lives. But we know these effects, but we know a lot less about why these effects influence different people differently, and also how these effects occur. So that's why we looked into why some individuals might be more emotionally reactive to this type of threats, and also how this is connected to their attitudes toward immigrants. So as I already mentioned, the immigration debate is characterized by negative emotions, but emotions are also very key to how we process information and form judgments. They're kind of like a lens that color our judgments and cognition on incoming stimuli, and also define our interaction in social media. And why people might differ in their emotional reactivity. One response can be individual threat sensitivity, which I refer as tendency to pay attention and be affected by threatening stimuli. And in our work, we conceptualize this as the behavioral inhibition system, VIS, which is from the reinforcement sensitivity theory. And this is basically a conflict monitoring system within the brain that gets alerted by threatening and novel stimuli. And when activated, it shows us hypervigilance, inhibitions of ongoing behavior, anxious arousal, and uncertainty. And prior research has shown that those higher in threat sensitivity are also more susceptible to identity threats, feelings of meaninglessness, and also to misinformation and extremist content. So it's especially interesting to look into this in this topic. And also to kind of exemplify it, for example, from an evolutionary perspective, this was crucial for human survival, to have some people in the herd or a group of people that were more alerted to potential dangers, such as predators or toxins in food, for example. But then today, we still have this system which might be very interesting in social media context where we have incoming stimuli, we have different threats and harmful and hateful discourse, and we know very little about how this functions in this environment. So what we did? So we combined an experimental research to an online survey. We employed a simulated social media feed. On the right, you can see a screenshot of how that more or less looked like. It was aimed to mimic a little bit like a Facebook feed. And individuals can scroll, like, comment, and even post their own stuff while they're on this platform. And yeah, we used the mock social media platform tool for doing this. We recruited 748 participants in Flanders, in Belgium, with the help of a market research company, BPACT. And basically, participants first responded to some questions regarding their socio-demographics. There are other variables that we use as a controls, for example, political orientation, how much news media they use, and also what types of news media they use and how much they trust in the news media and the public broadcaster VRT. Then we asked them to log into the social media platform. And importantly, we just told them to scroll as you would normally do. We did not tell them to pay attention or look for something there or do anything. So this was totally up to them. And within the platform, we had the experimental manipulation, which there were 3. So in thread condition, they saw the second post in the feed, which was always the same, always different, while everything else was the same. So the thread version had a news post about immigration framed as a threat to the society, and warned about the social system collapse because of migration. And in the neutral, this was just a neutral news post about migration as a normal demographic trend. And in the control condition, they saw nothing related to migration. And after that, we measured their anxiety and anger responses, their perceived threat of immigration, and also their attitudes toward immigration. And I think I forgot to mention, but indeed, threat sensitivity, this was measured before the exposure on the social media feed. And what we expected to find was that threat framing would increase emotional reactions. It would also increase the perceived threat, and it would also lead to more negative attitudes compared to the other conditions. We also expected emotion shape the threat perception attitudes in the way that the more negative emotional reactions, the more negative attitudes, the more perceived threats. And indeed, we also expected that those higher in threat sensitivity would also report higher emotional reaction, especially anxiety. And what did we find? Well, yeah, indeed, we found that threat framing did increase the anger and anxiety responses. So on the left-hand side, the leftmost bar represents the threat condition. But however, we did not find direct effects on changes in attitudes or threat perception after the exposure. So this led us to conclude that maybe this type of short and very subtle perceived threat in the feed might just change how we feel and not necessarily how we directly think. In this graph, you can see the anxiety responses from individuals, and on the highest line, you can see the individuals more sensitive to threats, and the lower line represents those more low in threat sensitivity. And you can see that those higher are consistently higher in their responses, especially on the threat condition that it's on the left, where this difference is significantly larger. So we conclude that, yes, indeed, those more threat sensitive were also more responsive in their anxiety. However, we did not find the same effect for anger, which theoretically makes sense because threat sensitivity is especially linked to anxiety. And here, finally, is a moderated serial mediation model that we tested. So to walk you through it, indeed, there was no direct effect from the threat frame to attitudes. But indeed, we did find that those in the threat frame condition reported higher anxiety. And this anxiety was linked to higher perceived threat, which again was linked to immigration attitudes, in more negative attitudes. And for those that were more sensitive to threat, this pathway was more amplified. And we found a similar pathway for anger, but that was not moderated by threat sensitivity. And of course, we cannot assume causality from this type of experiment, but I think it's a theoretically interesting and potential explanation for how social media exposure, even in a subtle and short way, can influence our attitudes in quite unconscious ways. So to conclude, yes, indeed, we did find that individuals differ in their emotional reactivity based on their personality. And even this type of short and subtle exposure can muddle and potentially accumulate over time, because we probably see this type of things over time. And this was also a very subtle example compared to more explicit hate speech. And hate exploits this very mechanism of threat sensitivity by amplifying fears and threats, and this is especially prominent in the right-wing populist actor speech. And we can see that even news posts that mimify this kind of discourse can already influence and potentially normalize this type of discourse. And what I want to leave you with is that while we discuss sensitivity as a potential susceptibility today, there's also research that shows that based on other individual characteristics, such as aggression, it can actually also be a protective feature. And work on related constructs such as environmental sensitivity has showed that while individuals more sensitive to threats or more sensitive to environmental cues do indeed suffer more negative effects, they also benefit more from positive interventions. So in that sense, sensitivity can be a double-edged word, and we need more research, of course, to find out how that actually works. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone. It's for me very nice to be here and to have just this presentation for you. I will tell about the Gulen movement, but it will be as an example just to show you a mechanism how hate speech can cause into the reality. I just conducted the desk research. It was analysis of some articles, of some documents which were prepared in past few years, and the researchers, they were analyzing the content which was present in public narration, for example, in public media, when sometimes the television or radio or just paper media described the situation about the Gulen movement members, the researchers analyzes what was the language used for this narration to describe some kind of situation or the context of being a part of this movement. So for the first, I would like to share with you that there was two sentences from the research participants. Well, nobody wants to talk to you. You're like monster. Everyone avoids you. There is the consequence of just of a hate speech. There is the sentence which shows how it causes to the people who are the to whom is addressed those hate speech words. Waking up one morning as a terrorist in a country you've served for years was complete destruction. This was the main factor in my decision to attempt suicide. This is the second case to describe how it might causes. Just only words used in improper way. It was just that the researchers proved that some of those narrative was based, well, I'm just on fairy tales, I could say. I mean, it was no facts, no reality. They were just talking something like gossiping about people just only because they were engaged in the Gulen movement. And they were just describing those people that they are just not like being a human, not like being engaged participants in the country. And the description which were visible in this research, in this analysis, was that the people, they were filled as we heard in the previous presentation, how the emotions might be influensive. So here they were people who felt real consequences just because somebody says something which was not true about them, and those not true words, they were created just only because somebody was part of this Gulen movement. So I just want to show you, well, on just the scale, just to show the situation, but it will be not the main key point in my presentation, but just to show the scale. More than 700 people, they were imprisoned. Just because somebody thought that they might be connected to Gulen movement. It wasn't important. They were or they wasn't. Somebody heard about Gulen movement or somebody didn't. Just people, they were imprisoned. So there were also 76 children who were imprisoned. More than 8,000 scientists, they lost their work because somebody was thinking that they are just connected with Gulen movements. And they were just real consequences for, I could say, unreal facts, which became to the public, which became to the public just because somebody called them that they are part of the Gulen movement. So they were also, this dehumanizing language was visible just in the newspapers, and they were like veto, virus, traitor, internal enemy. They were just descriptions just for the people, just only because they were connected somehow, some way, nobody knows which way, but it was, everybody knows that it was the way, for sure. And it was just only reason just to describe those people or those group. And it causes just for real consequences to real people. Sorry for this presentation. So it was the most important point was the, I don't know how to say in Turkey this name, maybe somebody could help. Thank you. So it was the Grand Chamber ruled that convictions-based passively association is not evidence because it was in the main court for the human rights. So it was the precedents just to cause the real consequences that it might be under discussion. So that's why that this court decision was so crucial for this topic. So here is the mechanism, how it can work. Maybe not so clever visible in this presentation, but you can see here there are 5 steps. There is a label and frame, presumption, legal administrative decision. As I mentioned about these researchers, they are very good examples. Or just those imprisoned children who are just children of their moms imprisoned also. Miserable harms, which were also in isolation, depression, suicide risks. And those were consequences which were noted by researchers who observed those people who were under depression just because they were connected with Gulen movements, and feedback loops, how it causes to the people. And the key mechanism I would like to associate with is the Gordon Allport hate speech pyramid. This was the construction which was prepared, this is the theoretical model prepared in 1956 by American social psychology professor, and he described that there is how the hate speech might cause that when you look at this pyramid. This is how it is constructed, that verbal disapproval is a base, which is the biggest part of this pyramid. And it might be seen that, well, I'm just few words, who cares? Just one word, somebody say it's okay, somebody will say it's not, it's just words. So this pyramid shows how this construction causes, how it results in the future. So the second step is avoidance, marginalization, isolation, dehumanization, which is just consequence of calling somebody that is unwanted here, that is a public enemy or something like that. So third step is discrimination. It's real abandons, like just closing some areas or ban some access to some services or some situations like, so those researchers are a good example in this point. Physical violence is a fourth step, which is just in this pyramid. This is just the consequence of this hate speech. When somebody is talking something against some people or some group, it might consequence real physical violence. And Gulen movement was the one of the example, because they were the situation in history which were described by this mechanism. The most, I could say, popular, probably it's not the proper word in this context, but the most popular situation which was analyzed by this pyramid was Holocaust. Because it was visible how the negative narration against some group of people causes to extermination, which is the fifth step of this hate pyramid. And then when we observed during Second World War or before decades or 2 decades previous Second World War narration against Jewish people, we can observe all of the steps, how the hate speech pyramid works. So, and now analyzing those behaviors against Gulen movement's people, we can observe that they are just a few steps further, not extermination in this clearest way, I could say, but also to physical violence. So we can see that we are here on the fourth step in this model. So this is just the key point I just wanted to share, because, you know, those conception was created just more than 70 years ago. So we could say that nobody knows how it works, but in practice, it seems like probably it doesn't matter, or maybe sometimes words are not so valuable like or another active or more physical behaviors are more valuable than just words. So we can see that words means also very much and may cause us really very seriously for some people. So we can see here also consequences just individuals like civil death, like mental health crisis. It was also visible in this research that women are most vulnerable group in whole of this population of Gulen movement's families, just because they causes most consequences, just more than men, because they were facing all of those negative narrations. But and men just were, well, I'm just only losing job, I could say. And women just, they were, for example, imprisoned with children, or just facing with just critical in public space, or just negative, well, negative glimpse, like they were just living the same way they were living in previous time. Somebody connected them with Gulen movements, and suddenly, from the next day, they are just unwanted people in the society. So they were just women were more valuable to face such kind of situations. Yeah, so and also family impact. So this is just the consequences are not directed to one person, but also to whole family or to whole group which those person might be connected with. Breaking the chain, I was trying to find some recommendations, but it was not so easy, just because the structural reasons that when we think that they are just independent countries which can organize their regulation inside, or just we can think that just people are doing or just talking different things. So I just can show the consequences of such kind of situation when they are negative narration, how it might cause us. Probably it might be an impulse, just reflection, that it could be possible to change. Also, when we take a glimpse to anti-discrimination trainings, they are also a way to support people who are suffering from social exclusion or discrimination. But there is also a huge step for, I think, just to educate whole the society, how to support the people, or just how to be a bit critical reading media informations against somebody. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today, and generally thank you for being here. My name is Soraya, and today I will be speaking about digital platforms as tools for influence and polarized politics. So just to give you a little bit of information, I'm gonna look into the paper focus and give you some background about the frameworks that I'm gonna speak about, and move on to the analysis, and then hopefully we can take on the discussion together. Today's presentation and the paper that you probably have focuses on populism and its instrumentalization of the topic of immigration, and its focus is the Indian population in Ireland, which is the context that I come from. The focus is also on neoliberalism as a framework that explains how this polarized politics work, and in the process how this vilification of the different immigrant population is happening. The argument is that this digital communication contributes to the instrumentalization and the topic of immigration that highly gives into the political agendas in the contemporary politics. And this has an economic underpinning that is more telling than any other, or aside from other factors of the instrumentalization. And also, I will look into populism as an inherently polarized political strategy. So just to briefly look into the context and some of the frameworks to give you a bit of background. So populism in its nature is a dualistic type of political strategy. It's always against two, or there needs to be at least two entities in this strategy for populism to work. And of course, the contemporary type of dualistic strategy is the famous right and left politics. The right and left itself is also quite old. It's from the 17th century and the French Revolution, where the two parties sit against either side of the king, one being pro the king and one being against what was being proposed. So as you can see, some of these strategies are inherently dualistic or polarized. The right and left can also be understood in terms of the acceptance of inequality. It's a theory that is developed by Bobbio in 1994. So when we put Ireland into this context of populism and dualistic politics and so on, it fits quite well because Ireland comes from like a history of having to deal with not only colonialism, but also having to choose one side of the history or the other. And this was because of the conflict of Northern Ireland with the imperialist British authorities. And this resulted in an agreement or a treaty in 1920, which was called the Good Friday Agreement. But while it was an agreement, it also created two political parties, one being pro-treaty and one being against the treaty. And one of these political parties supported the unification of Ireland as a whole within Northern Ireland, and the other supported unification of Ireland, while Northern Ireland being part of the British Empire. From 1920s onwards, there were a lot of other political parties and movements that took place in Ireland. And to look into the hate-propagating parties, some of the examples are the Irish Republican Party, of course, the extremist side, that also are famous for supporting the Nazis in the 1940s. There were also the ultra-conservative and the Catholic political parties in Ireland, and also the movement of blue shirts. And there are some scholarship that have connected these political parties to the contemporary far-right movement or rise in Ireland, namely Yasin Ahmed, who looked into some of these attacks and its connection to these parties. So Ireland also has a turn towards the new liberalism. It faces a housing crisis since the 1980s, and it is still ongoing. But in the process, it is also facing a quite high economic advancement, namely the Celtic Tiger economical boom of the 2000s. It had a slowdown around 2008, but it accelerated again. It is also a central hub for the high tech companies and their headquarter offices because of offering a lower tax to some of these companies. And overall, it is taking a turn towards the privatization, including or such as the private property management and so on. It is also facing a lot of deregulation. It is opening its market to markets that was previously under the government control are being privatized, such as the energy sector or electricity, and there is a list under this privatization schemes. So these are all matching the principles of neoliberalism, which generally aims to decrease the role of government in economy. And these are very gradual, they're very eventual. Nevertheless, it is following some of these major principles. So while this is happening, we also have a change in the demographic and migration into Ireland. From 2021 until 2024, we had an overall of 1.6 million immigration into Ireland. And this of course included the returning Irish people. But just to take a look at a more detailed demographic, we have the census of 2022, where 45,500 Indian population came to Ireland. And in the same year, 10,000 of this immigrant population were already or were coming to take up residence into Ireland. And in 2024, highest level of work permits were issued to the Indian population. So, these population come to Ireland because there's a demand for work, there's a demand for tech sector as well as service sector that is very driven by the very neoliberal and the privatization of the economics in Ireland. And of course, these are highly regulated by the government, and the demand is often announced by the government itself. So this year, 2025, we have seen a rise in the hatred against the Indian population. And we don't really know whether this is a rise or this is the media pick up on these events. It could be either way, because when these events are being recorded, they are not recorded as racially against Indian population specifically. They are only categorized as racially motivated hate incidents. And some of these numbers that are reflected in here, apart from the official ones, they are numbers that are based on the media reporting of the hate incidents against the population. But generally, overall, there has been a rise in the hate incidents in the country, and this is also an increase from the year 2020 onwards. Each year taking a 24% increase. And 39% of these incidents are categorized as racially motivated incidents. So as you can see from this summer or July of 2025, the media picked up on a lot of these events. It also caused the Indian embassy in Ireland to officially issue a statement saying that Ireland is not safe for the Indian population, or be careful of whereabouts you go. And this was the first time that it happened against this population. This also had a lot to do with the online mobilization. A lot of these attacks were connected back to the online mobilization, and it's known to be as a form of assertive kind of amplification to build narratives. The attacks themselves, they are quite segregated and rather dispersed all around the country, but and they are not mobilized in terms of the action of the attack itself, but the narrative around it is built on the online platforms. And this also includes the connection of immigrants generally, but this summer particularly the Indian population, their connection with the antisocial behavior, such as pedophilic behavior, and the narratives how women and children are not safe, school spaces are not safe, and so forth. And oftentimes when these events or these narratives are analyzed in detail, there are down the line false narratives. It's also, as discussed by the panelists, often these movements have led to physical harm and physical, physical harm basically, which has resulted on the reporting of media on these incidents. Also the far right capitalized on some of these narratives quite extensively, and especially the pattern was taken from how far right functioned in the UK and then applied to the Dublin context or Ireland context. So the Administration of Justice report have done a very detailed analysis of this mobilization, which looked into the figures, languages, and terminologies of how these amplifications take place. And again, within the context of Ireland, these rhetorics, these strategies are often followed by the models in the UK, in the US, and are taken from single actors and rather transferred into the Irish context. One of the things that happened this year was using the Northern Ireland conflict as an opportunity to mobilize people against immigrants, where different phrases were used, such as Catholics and Protestants being marching shoulder to shoulder to stand against immigrants. And this is very, for the Irish context, if anybody hears this, they absolutely know it's wrong and nobody would believe it, but it was targeted for a rather international audience, where such frameworks and so So, and a lot of this is obviously as reflected or to trigger emotive frameworks that are tied to the history of Ireland and making it into this Irish, trying to bring it into this Irish context to mobilize people. Most of it has not been successful, but these is scattered, segregated attacks that have physical consequences as a harm have unfortunately been successful. And the summer of 2025 is one of the cases of this. So that kind of sums up what I have to say today, and mainly a lot of things that are being suggested in the context of Ireland is very detailed because the country is a very small country, and the context is also very specific. The reports oftentimes suggest that we need to have the trade unions involved in this type of matters, because when there is a demand for immigration or for workers to come into country, the politics of it should also be considered and should be taken into account. And then we also have the Community Action Tenant Union, CATU, in Ireland, and there has been some official request for them to be involved to not let some of the crises, namely the housing crisis, being blamed on the immigrant population. There's also a vacuum on the positive voices around immigration in Ireland, and this is mainly because the positive voices have been withdrawn. When this negativity has risen, often people just decide not to engage or not to have arguments online, and this has created a vacuum for not only far-right leaders but also other those agitating actors to be more free and to take more precedent. And again, the locality of anti-immigration sentiment remain quite significant in Ireland, because everything happens locally, although some patterns are related to the international mapping of the far right and hate agitators. The locality remain quite vital. We are working continuously on transnational mapping. For example, the relationship between Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland, that has been quite helpful in rather debunking some of these myths and propaganda and narratives around migration. With that, I finish, and yeah, thank you.
Okay, so our last speaker, unfortunately, we cannot solve the technical difficulties now, but maybe she will join in another session. I think we have like about 15 minutes for the Q&A. Would anyone like to start with a question? No? Okay.
For the last speaker, thank you, by the way, to all three of you. It was super interesting. You talk about transnational mapping that you do. How would that, how do you do that? How do you map these kind of narratives?
Yeah, thank you. So recently we have a lot of, for example, youth organization coming together to tackle disinformation and misinformation around the topic of immigration. And a lot of things have come up in terms of what can we learn from other European countries. For example, Germany, Austria, France, Poland, and so on. And we look into some of the best practices that these countries have taken to tackle some of the misinformation and disinformation. For example, in Germany, there is a robust infrastructure by the government itself that are based on grassroots to basically take a bottom-up approach to say, okay, what narratives are wrong or what is right, and so on. and they report it to a legal entity, and then the legal entity take it to some of the social media platforms or companies. And this type of, infrastructure cannot be done without the role of government. So this is some of the mappings that we do in terms of, okay, what are, how other countries tackle these issues. We don't do things like, okay, for example, how far right functions in Germany and try to apply it to Ireland, because again, the locality, the local context matters so much. For example, oftentimes what is considered right wing in Ireland might be considered left in Germany. And these dynamics are quite important to pay attention. So those type of general mapping has not been useful, but the mapping is rather intended for solution based. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to ask a question to Sylvia Heinun. The study that you conducted is super interesting for me, and I want you to elaborate more in your method, because you say that you simulate a social media platform, and there is also some participants in there, and I just want to know, how do you mitigate the effect of the social media impact on the respondents there? Because maybe there is some of anxiety issues that happening because of that platform. Are you maybe you can elaborate more on that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so indeed, all the participants actually saw the same feed except for the post. So that's how we could know that the effects that we found were based on what they saw on the feed. So the platform, yeah, exactly. So they saw we implemented 5 posts that were very, 4 of them were pillar posts, so-called. So they were about having a cup of coffee in the morning or a news update, but they all saw the same thing. So the difference was the second post, that was the experimental manipulation. So based on this, we can assume that the effects that we found were based on the post that they saw and not other factors, because otherwise they were randomized in these 3 conditions. So that would mitigate other personality differences, let's say, in anxiety.
So the subject is already differentiated and they already know themselves, or?
Yeah, we didn't tell them.
Okay,
so
so
we,
randomized.
in the end, exactly. So that was hidden, and then in the end, we told them what we were actually researching. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your
so much.
question.
Any other questions? No? Maybe if it's allowed, then I will have a question for Anita. I was wondering, with the presumptions on the Gulen movement, how does it work in practice in judgments of courts, for instance? Is this just when they are related to the Gulen movement that they can be prosecuted? And are there any changes after the European Court of Human Rights condemnation?
Yes, there were changes, especially the key point of change was that the situation has been described. I mean, that somebody identify the situation, that there is something wrong with this case. I mean, previously it looked like there is a normal situation. I mean, that there is some arguments in public space, and everybody thought, well, maybe there is something, maybe there is an issue, maybe there is something wrong with this Gulen movement, and this decision court shows that there is absolutely nothing, that there was no reason, in fact.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there are no further questions, then I guess we can have a coffee break, which is outside, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But let us it's there. But let us first again thank the speakers and give them a lot of applause.